At minus 52 degrees Celsius, your breath freezes before it leaves your mouth. Metal burns skin. Silence feels heavier than noise. I came here thinking I would document how shepherds survive one of the coldest places on Earth. But on my first night, I realized something terrifying. Out here, the animals don't live with the people. The people live because of the animals. When the storm hit, walls shook. Dogs buried themselves in snow to protect sheep. And one mistake, one loose door. One missed checkmate. Someone wouldn't see morning. This isn't a story about cold. It's about what happens when winter decides who is allowed to stay alive. Asterisk, asterisk, the plane disappeared into the gray sky, leaving only silence behind. No engine noise, no voices, just wind. It cut across the frozen land like a blade. I stood still for a moment, adjusting my hood, trying to understand where I was. Asterisk, the thermometer hanging outside the wooden station read minus 52 degrees Celsius. The air burned my lungs when I breathed. Asterisk, before this storm decides who survives. Subscribe. Because stories like this, real people, real animals, real cold, don't get told twice. Asterisk, my eyelashes stiffened almost instantly. This was home now. Asterisk, at least for the winter. The shepherds approached slowly, wrapped in layers of fur, wool, and patched fabric, darkened by years of smoke and snow. Their faces were weathered, unreadable. Asterisk, they didn't smile. Smiling wasted heat, they lived with their animals, not near them. Asterisk, dogs, sheep, and people shared the same structures, the same warmth, the same risks. Out here, separation meant death. The lead shepherd, an older man with ice in his beard, nodded once and gestured for me to follow. No words were exchanged. Asterisk, words came later. When fingers were warm enough to move, their settlement was a cluster of low huts, half buried in snow. Smoke rose from narrow chimneys, barely visible against the white sky. Asterisk, the dogs noticed me first. Thick-coated shepherd dogs, alert, silent, watching. Inside the main shelter, not warmth, survival, heat. The smell of animals, damp wool, and burning fat filled the air. Asterisk, sheep huddled together in one corner, their bodies forming a living wall against the cold. Dogs lay between them and the humans, acting as both heaters and alarms. I was given a place near the fire. Boots off, gloves off. Asterisk, no sudden movements. That night, the storm arrived without warning. The wind howled so hard the walls shook. Asterisk, snow forced its way through cracks, piling along the floor. One of the younger shepherds checked the animals every hour. Another fed the fire constantly, never letting it fade. I didn't sleep. None of us did. This was only the first night. And already the cold was testing me. Asterisk, days blurred together. There was no sunrise, only a lighter shade of gray for a few hours before darkness returned. Time was measured by tasks, not clocks. Feed the sheep. Check their legs for frostbite. Break ice for water. Repair walls, gnawed by wind. Move snow before it buried the doors. The cold was not dramatic. It was patient. It waited for mistakes. One morning, a sheep didn't stand up. The shepherds noticed instantly. They moved fast, lifting the animal, rubbing its legs, breathing warm air into its nose. Frostbite spread quickly here. One bad night could cost a life. The dogs pressed closer, adding their heat. Slowly, painfully, the sheep moved again. No celebration followed. Survival was expected. That night, the storm returned stronger. The wind screamed like something alive. Snow slammed into the walls hard enough to feel like impacts. One of the outer shelters collapsed under the weight. We ran into the darkness, ropes tied around our waists, visibility nearly zero. My face went numb in seconds. Panic followed immediately after. We found the dogs first. 2 of them had refused to leave the sheep. They were buried almost entirely, still standing, bodies acting as shields. We dug with bare hands when tools failed. By the time we dragged everyone back inside, my fingers were useless, skin pale, no feeling. A shepherd grabbed my hands and forced them into warm water. Slowly, painfully, to fast meant permanent damage. I bit down hard to keep from screaming. That night, one of the younger shepherds admitted something quietly. Every winter, someone leaves. Sometimes an animal, sometimes a person. The cold doesn't care who you are. I understood then. This place wasn't about strength. It was about respect. Weeks passed. My body adapted. Breathing hurt less. Movements became efficient. I learned when to stop, when to push, and when to listen without question. The shepherds spoke more now. Stories of storms that erased camps, of winters when the animals saved the people, and others when it was the opposite. One morning, the wind stopped. Silence filled the land, heavy and strange. The temperature climbed to -30°C, almost gentle by comparison. The sky cleared for the first time, revealing endless white under pale light. The animals sensed it before we did. The dogs relaxed. The sheep spread out slightly, no longer pressed together in fear. It was the end of the worst part of winter. On my last day, the older shepherd walked with me to a ridge overlooking the settlement. Smoke rose steadily. Life continued. He spoke only once. "The cold didn't beat you," he said. "That means it accepted you." There was no handshake, no goodbye ceremony. When the transport finally arrived days later, I looked back at the huts, the people who lived where the world tried to kill them. Every night, they didn't conquer the cold, they lived with it, and that was why they survived. Leaving did not feel like escape. It felt unfinished. As the sled pulled away, the cold returned to its quiet watch, wrapping the land as if nothing had happened. The shepherds did not wave. They were already back to work, moving hay, checking knots, adjusting walls. Survival here allowed no pauses for sentiment. I realized then that the hardest part of living in this place was not the temperature, it was accepting that life continued whether you stayed or left weeks later. Warmth felt wrong. Rooms were too silent. Food was too easy. I woke at night expecting wind against the walls, expecting to count animals, expecting the fire to demand attention. My hand still moved automatically, checking pockets for gloves that were no longer needed. The cold had trained my body, but more than that, it had changed how I measured comfort and fear. Even now, when winter storms hit elsewhere and people complain about the cold, I think of those shepherds and their animals standing together in the dark. I think of the dogs buried in snow, refusing to move, of sheep breathing life into one another. In one of the coldest places on earth, I learned something simple and unforgiving. Survival is not about fighting nature. It is about learning when to stand still beside it.